Hi, I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com or, of course, follow us on Instagram at filmmaker_u. Every week, we interview a film professional to discuss their work, and this week, I'm joined by composer Ceiri Torjussen, whose work includes Cold Case Files, The Bombardment, and more recently, Nightwatch Demons Are Forever on Shudder. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I guess my first question for you is, how did you get involved with this film? Because it is a sequel and you weren't on the original one.
Yeah, the original was done in I think '94. It was it's a Danish film by Ole Bornedal as the director, and Ola has worked a lot with my mentor Marco Beltrami, who's a composer, does a lot of big movies, and Ola and Marco had worked together for a long time, and I had actually early in my career I was orchestrating for Marco. And we'd worked on a film called I Am Dina, which is a Norwegian German co-production. And I'd gone to Cologne, I think it was, to record that score with Marco, and met Ola at that time. Anyway, fast forward 20 years, and Ola asked Marco and to work on The Bombardment, which was a Second World War, an excellent film on Netflix, Second World War film about a RAF bombing of a Gestapo headquarters in Copenhagen during the war. And Marco had brought me in, and Buck, also, who works a lot with Marco, Buck Sanders, to work on the score with him. So the three of us did that score together, and it went really well. And Ola really loved what I did on it. And so Ola had this sequel to Nightwatch, which he thought would be great for me to work on. So he asked me to score Nightwatch Demons Are Forever, which is the sequel to the film from 30 years ago.
I do want so one of the things that sort of stood out for me when I watched it is the opening scene, which
Mm-hmm.
plays again later in the film, but I feel like usually in a film you would have lots of music at the start, but really we sit there in
Mm-hmm.
almost dead silence for a while. And then
Mm-hmm.
even when you start bringing in the music, it's really subtle. So like, what were the notes on this? Like, how did you approach the scene? Was there different variations?
The notes, interestingly on this film, Ola didn't really use any temp music, or barely any temp music, which was really cool because it gave me a sort of a blank slate to work from. Often, as composers, we get temporary music that the editors and the filmmakers put in as a sort of a placeholder to give the composer an idea about what they want. The problem is it can be quite stifling sometimes creatively because everyone's expecting music like the temp, everyone's getting used to the temp, and composers don't really like having to deal with that. And so it was very refreshing to not have any temp. So, but what Ola did give me was notes. He went through the film with me and said, "I want music here. I want music here. Try bring it in roughly around here." It was kind of rough, but he was very specific about where he wanted score, but he didn't know what exactly he wanted. So, um, in that opening scene, it's an interview scenes, right? So it's a police procedural kind of feel to it. It's a fly on the wall. It's actually literally supposed to be a what do you call it?
Security camera.
Yeah, a observation camera. So we wanted it to be very verite, very kind of in the room, and then that gradually turns into the horror of the character. What you realize is happening. I don't want to give too much away. People haven't seen it, but so that's kind of what we did. So yeah, it was kind of a fun way to start it. Start with just actually it started there was music fairly early. You don't actually notice that it's music. It's kind of like electrical hum in the room.
Yeah.
Gradually turns into the score, but that actually came out of my score. I think it was sound effects, and then I took it over as part of the score, and then it turned into the score cue.
I've been a camera person for 30 years and I fell in love with cinema. I heard there was free film school in France and I wanted to get into the French film school. I really didn't know anything at the time, but I knew at least how to take pictures. So I said, I'll try for the image department. And then when I miraculously got into the French film school, I fell in love with working with the camera. You're following what's going to be in the movie. So that immediacy that the camera allows is what I loved from the beginning. I'm Kirsten Johnson. and this is my course about documentary cinematography.
Well, that was going to be one of my questions because I noticed that I don't want to call it tone, I guess tonal music, but it's sort
Yeah,
of
it's tone, yeah.
yeah, because it's like there was a couple of times where I'm like, oh, the air conditioning slowly fades into something, or like you said, the electrical buzz. Um, Now, one of the things I'd be interested in knowing, because you said that you didn't have um, a temp track to go off
Hmm.
of,
Hmm.
because you came in later in the rough cut phase, which usually
Right.
composers would be on earlier to discuss things.
Hmm.
What? So with like there was no temp music in the rough cut that was given you, right?
I think there might have been temp before, but he took it out.
Okay.
I think he had another composer on originally,
Mhm.
and that didn't work out. For I think two other composers on originally, maybe, but those they didn't work out. So he had some music flying around the film, but he just took it out. He didn't want me to be influenced by
Yeah.
anything, which was cool because then I had a real blank slate to start from, which was fun.
Well, I'm interested in how you tackled that. Like, did you like I've seen some composers who just like watch a scene several times and then sort of toss it up and like play along. Others will build it and sort of play with it in certain parts.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't have the temp music, you almost have this huge freedom. So like, you know, what was your sort of creative process around that? And also like, did the pacing of the film or the edit impact your writing? In the,
Definitely, yeah. I mean, the edit is really what it is giving you the rhythm of the music often.
Mhm.
So if the edit is fast and if it's sharp cutting, and then it implies a faster cue typically, um, and vice versa. So there's that as far as speed goes. As far as what I was going to write, Ola had talked about wanting to use electronic sounds a lot. We didn't have a budget for a big orchestra or anything,
Mhm.
but I wanted to really lean into the kind of electronic sound as a texture. Also, I actually did some recording of moths because one of the aspects of the movie is that there's a sort of a scene where there's some moths trapped in a lamp
Mhm.
in the film, and Ola had the idea of representing one of the characters, one of the kind of nasty characters in the movie as an insect. So I thought, well, why not literally record moths and then turn it into sound?
Mhm.
So I recorded a moth outside our house here in Topanga, and was able to sort of slow it down enough so that it turned into a rhythm, the moth flapping of the wings. And then if you speed a rhythm up really fast, when it's if you get any kind of rhythmic sound that's a sharp rhythmic sound and speed it up really fast, it gradually turns into pitch,
Mhm.
gradually turns into a tone. And so I was able to play with this idea of a tone becoming rhythm and a rhythm becoming tone. So that was kind of fun. So that was one of the key sounds I used in the score. And then it was a matter of finding the what worked with the scene and what instruments I would sort of feature. I featured a lot of low woodwind as well,
Mhm.
for the kind of the serial killer character, and then a lot of sort of analog style, gritty kind of electronic sounds, and
What's
that kind of developed over time. And as
Yeah,
a,
'cause what's interesting is um, you say that like you guys didn't want it to sound like any other or film or just replicating previous films,
Mhm.
but it almost I don't want to say it pays homage, but it feels like it sort of pays homage to other films in the sense of like I think about the when she looks to where her mom was killed, and you can hear the driving chords and like that beat sort of going
Mhm.
underneath. It doesn't sound like another horror film, but it has the feeling of a horror film, I guess, for lack of a better
Well,
term.
yeah, I mean that's kind of what we're going on. We want it to be creepy and disturbing, but we don't want to sort of rely on the typical cliches. So
Yeah,
that was kind of the hope, is we want to creep the audience out for sure, but we want to
yeah,
try to do it in an unusual way and
yeah.
without sounding cliche.
And I just want to make sure you didn't create the pop music whenever she had the headphones on.
No, no.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure because I would have some questions about that. Um, the other thing, so like in my notes, when I look at my notes, um, when she's in the basement, there's almost like breathy tones or a realistic feel for it. I'm wondering for Emma, like what kind of soundscape did you build for her in terms of the music? Because it kind like you said, it goes between real sounds and non.
Yeah. Which basement you talking about?
When she goes down and the security guards like never go in that room.
Oh,
And like her first night, she goes into the room.
in the morgue, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it was just a matter of kind of like playing with sounds, and it seemed a very kind of breathy. I think I even used voices during that sequence as well, and that was kind of that came in later actually. Oh, I wanted the idea of voices, and so we sort of brought those in later, but later in the process, I mean. But I had a bunch of sort of breathy type synth sounds that I generated, which I thought were fitting the ambience. I kind of like to think about where you are physically in a space, and then think what kind of sounds come out of that space, and then create those sounds, and then that is my score. You know what I mean? That's sort of some of the underpinnings of the sounds I use in the score, because then it's kind of this sort of gray area between sound design and music, and I love having the score just kind of creep out to that sort of imperceptibly. That's one of the things I enjoy doing. So
probably one of the smartest things I've ever done for my career. It gave me all the tools that I needed to be able to jump into a new career.
Getting myself into a mindset, thinking like an editor, and being around people that I can talk to on that level was really invaluable to me.
A lot of the things that I learned from that class, I still think about.
I loved the classroom. I loved the computer stations. We built a sense of community.
And it also instills a lot of confidence in you to take that and go out into the world.
After I took the class, I felt very prepared to take the next step.
I owe Manhattan Workshop the career that I have right now. Things have been going great, and I really have the Manhattan Workshop to thank for that.
Well, and I really enjoyed that, particularly in the first scene, because it was like I was watching it and I missed where the sound, like the music came in. I had to like rewind and be like, okay, where did this come in?
right,
Because you're engaged in the scene in the moment.
right.
Was there a particular sort of scene or moment that was really difficult for you to figure out and get?
There was a few really tricky bits. Yeah, it's hard to talk about the movie without giving too much plot away, but there's a scene where Fanny, the main character, is having an interview with well, not having an interview, is interrogating the serial killer, the from the original movie. And it's kind of a creepy scene because you don't know, you know, this guy's gonna like bite her head off. She's in a sailor asylum in the cell with this serial killer, which is a bit nuts. But so she's interviewing him very closely, and it's this, he's not reacting at all. He's just completely, you know, still, and she's getting more and more hyped up. And originally, my original cue was, you know, a very tense cue that builds up, making the viewer think something's going to happen. But Ola realized after a while, I think, that to do a complete 180, and in fact, she's talking about her memory of her mother who was killed. Well, I don't want to give all the story away, but her mother is dead, and she's trying to blame the serial killer and for her death. And so that the music ended up being quite a sad cue, quite a, you know, reflective, sad thing. And Ola much preferred that approach because it turns the scene from a tense, oh my God, what is this guy going to do scene into a, how does it feel for the main character? How does it feel for Fanny? And for her, this is a moment of catharsis and a moment of being able to, you know, let go of her angst, but in a very sad way. And so it's a great way of how score can manipulate the viewer. You know, do we want the viewer to be terrified at this point, or do we want them to be sad for Fanny? And because of what happens later, there's enough time to be terrified later in the scene. But earlier on in the scene, Ola wanted a sadder approach. And so that was an interesting, that took a bit of back and forth, that one especially, yeah.
It's interesting because you mentioned that, and I noticed while I was watching, I can think of only one moment where there's like a jump scare where like you can hear the keys sort of come in,
Hmm.
and and a lot of it's like there's an expectation of it, and then you're like, okay, it didn't happen. So
Right.
is this a discussion with Ola about saving it for that one jump scare so that's more impactful there, or like what was the discussion around
In
that?
that specific scene, yeah, there was a lot of back and forth. I think Ola was quite clear on where he wanted the jumps. Well, let me think. He definitely wanted the jump scares later. And then I think I interpreted it like I was trying to figure out the rhythm of the scene and what, where would be the best place. It's not good to, throw all your eggs in one basket immediately, like too
Mhm,
soon in the scene. Otherwise, you've got nowhere to go. So it's about building up and about pacing it to the point where you keep the tension going, but you don't let it all out straight away.
mhm. So I would love to know, I know this one was very much more, you didn't have the money for an orchestra and what have you, but
Hmm.
when you're regularly working on a film or a show, do you prefer to do it more analog or do you prefer to do it more digital?
It completely depends on the show. If it's something that needs live instruments, then I'll bring in live instrument. I mean, I'll mock it up and then record
Hmm.
live instruments. If it's something like this where it actually sounds better as a more synth-based textures, then I focus on that. It's got to serve the picture. Whatever you do, it's got to serve the picture. So.
Now, I read in one of your bios that I found that you also compose some experimental music. I was
Mhm.
wondering if you could tell us about that. What's the experimental music movement like at the moment? And
I don't know really what the movement is like. I mean, I listen to a lot of music. I love all sorts of music. I listen to a lot of new music, a lot of concert music and experimental stuff. Um, I kind of one of my biggest influences people like Georges Ligeti and Penderecki and
Mhm.
the sort of post-war avant-garde composers, and I still love listening to their music and people whom they have influenced, like Lachenmann and also all sorts of European composers, I guess, but a lot of American composers too. And I'm kind of interested in doing things with spoken word, recording spoken word and turning that into music. So I sort of messed around with that kind of thing a lot. I still write when I am able to. I still write chamber music, so I write for strings and piano, but try to explore sounds, often in a more extreme way than I can in your average film. Although horror movies, kind of the sky's the limit in a horror movie. You can do anything. That's why they're so fun to do. So, um, what else do I like doing? I love found sounds, just like I do in movies. I'll record found sounds and sounds in the environment and incorporate those into pieces. Um, so yeah,
I have one last question for you. What would you
yeah.
say is your favorite guilty pleasure film or TV show to watch?
Guilty pleasure film or TV show? Well,
We could
we're
also say composer too.
okay. All right. Well, as TV show, we're loving Welcome to Wrexham because
Yeah.
it's about
Oh,
the
that's a
Welsh
great show.
soccer team. I don't know why that's guilty, but we love it. What else have we been loving? Oh, I checked out The Bureau recently, the French spy show, and I'm a massive espionage fan. So that show is, I think, an amazing spy series,
Yeah.
which not enough people know about, and I guess you know about it, but it's really fantastic. As far as movies, I don't know. I love Raiders and E.T. and the early Spielberg stuff, and the George Lucas stuff. I love, yeah. I think Raiders: The Lost Ark is my ultimate guilty pleasure movie. Um,
What about composers? Is there a
Guilty
guilty?
pleasure composers. Ooh, um, the Bee Gees.
There you
I
go.
think
They're
they're
great.
great
Yeah.
composers.
Yeah. And you don't realize until you really sit down and start to dissect it.
Harmonically, they're like amazing. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for letting me interview today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And that's it for this week, everyone. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com or, of course, on Instagram at filmmaker_u. I'm Gordon Burkell. Thanks for watching.